Go. We are beginning the second Iker. The second fundamental reality. So I'm out of breath. I'm always running. The second.
Take your time, Rob.
Thank you. I needed to breathe. I appreciate that. The second fundamental reality in understanding the core belief system of the Jewish people, and really the message that we're here to bring to the whole world. And we'll see that the second Iker, the second core reality, this is fundamentals here, and the third core reality go together. They unify together. As we'll see. The second core reality is Ani Mamin Be'emunah Shleima. I believe with absolute crystal clear consciousness Shaboire Yisborach Shemoi, that God, who Yochid, is one. Ve'ein Yichidus Kamoyu B'shum Ponim. And there's no unity like God's unity. God's unity is not like any other unity. V'hu levadoi Elokeinu. And only God is our God. Haya, Hoive, V'yeh. And beyond time. Was, is, and forever will be, which means outside of time, completely. This is going to be the mitzvah of what's called Yichud Hashem. The first Iker that we said, everything depends on the first Iker, which is that God's existence is existence.
What's Iker?
The main thing. Keep the main thing the main thing.
Okay.
The thing. And Iker means that there's something called the main thing, and then there's not the main thing. There's 13 main principles. But an Iker always has to be one. So there's one Iker, which is that God is existence. And existence flows from God. There's now 12 facets explaining the one Iker. The one Iker of God's existence is expressed in 12 ways. And these are the ways that we're connecting to that main Iker. And this Iker is that God's existence is not just that God is here, and not just that there's one God in the category of gods. You know, obviously, like, I believe in God. There's only one God, obviously, but there's a bunch of other stuff. There's me and there's you, there's tables and chairs, constellations, mustaches, nice hair, cool glasses. When somebody put those on, I said, there's only two people those could belong to. Either me or Bennett. Come on. So no, that's not the reality, that there's one God and a bunch of other stuff. That's soft-core monotheism. We said the Jewish people are into hardcore monotheism, which is God is one. We're inside of God right now. It's good, right? It hits different, like they say. We're inside of God right now. And we're going to learn that the question you should be asking, if God is one, there's nothing but God, so like, where am I? Who am I? Am I even here? So we'll get there. Don't worry, you're here. Don't worry. But it begs meditation. It begs thought in the unity, the absolute unity of God existence. So then where do we exist? Now, the corollary to the second Iker, and we're going to basically be learning them almost together, is the third Iker. And the third Iker is Ani Mamin Be'emunah Shleima She'aboire Yisborach Shemoi. I have absolute clear conviction and awareness that God Einoi Guf, does not have a body. V'loi Yasiguhu Masige Aguf, and no any semblance of a body. Ve'ein lo shum dimyon klal. There's no pictures, no images, graven images. No images. If anybody remembers from Sunday school growing up, it's one of the only things I remember, the graven images. No images. There's no figurines, there's no statues, there's no idols, nothing. You can't put any definition on God himself. And we'll see that those fit together, because if you start to give God any type of definition, God forbid, or body parts, you're claiming that there's an end to God, because the body has to end somewhere. The body is finite. Even spiritual limbs, well, you're saying that that limb goes from here till here. And then that, God forbid, creates a semblance of there being more than one. And there were people who erred in this. People made mistakes in this realm. Acher made a mistake like this. Yes, my friend?
The chariot mysticism that gets into that stuff?
It does, but all of that is coming below Atzmusai. Atzmusai, the essence of God. There's no images, there's no body. And people made mistakes with this.
Moshe saw the back of Hashem.
So Hashem revealed an element of creation called the back of his head. Now the first thing you're going to ask me, doesn't the Torah have all sorts of descriptions? God took us out of Egypt with a strong hand and an outstretched arm. Sounds like there's anthropomorphism all over the place. So the Rambam is clear about this. We'll make it clear today. We'll set the record straight. Every single time that you see any description of limb or body or the eyes of God or on the land or the mouth of God or any type of what you might call body, those are all analogies. Those are all analogies for me to understand how God is communicating with the world. That's a way that God created, it's a created element of him communicating with the creation. But the essence of God is that there's no physicality, there's no body, there's no goof, it's all one. And I have a feeling that Yosef wants to ask, well, don't we say that he really does have a hand, but our hand is just the analogy? So even that, yes, we say that God does have a hand, but his essence doesn't have a hand. Don't think that his hand looks like this. That this is just an analogy of God's hand. But even when we say that God's hand, we're not talking about the essence of God. The essence of God has nothing. There's only infiniteness. We're getting back to like the beginning of the story. This is like the Iker, okay? Without getting into, that's already talking about the Tzimtzum, in the Shtalshalus. Yes, Yosef.
Just for the record, I understand Hashem is incorporeal and we can't anthropomorphize Hashem. But I was going to ask something similar to what you guessed. I was going to say, like, to what you're saying, isn't this the analogy just to better understand Hashem?
So like we said, it's both. Is that, yes, this world has things that are an analogy to understand when God says that God took us out with a yad chazaka, b'zroi netuya, with a strong hand and an outstretched arm. So our hand, which is all about action and doing in the world, teaches me about God's hand, i.e. that he did something. He took us out of Egypt. So it's teaching me. When I see my hand, and that's why when you give tzedakah with your hand, you're being a giver. It teaches you about Hashem giving to us tzedakah. But we're going all the way back before that. The Rambam is taking us to the essence. In the essence, there's no body. It's all one. Okay? So far, so good. This is the language. This is like going into the source material here. This is like the authentic source material, the fundamentals of the Jewish people. And it's so important that we have to know who we are. We are given a mission to be what's called Or LaGoyim, to be a light unto the world. And this is the light that we have to bring. And the world wants us to bring that light out. So we have to know what this light is. So this is source material. This is in the Rambam. This is like from the source. This is one of my favorite ones because it happened to be that a great, great tzaddik named the Balatanya, he spent most of his life just talking about this. And the whole Tanya is really built on this, of unity consciousness, absolute unity consciousness, yichudu ilah, yichudu tata. And we're going to have to learn some Tanya together to really understand this. And by the way, this Iker, this Yesod of that God is absolute unity, is something that we go into as a meditation every single day. Pa'amayim b'chol yom, when we say, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. When you get to Echad, you should go into this meditation, and you plunging the depths of that meditation is a positive mitzvah in the Torah called Yichud Hashem. And to the degree that you go into that unity consciousness is the degree that you're fulfilling the mitzvah. Isn't that amazing? There's a mitzvah of plunging your consciousness into unity. That's the mitzvah. I was in a class, in a shir, that we were working on Shema, and it took us 6 years just to go through Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad Baruch Shem Kavod Malchusay Li'olam Vod. 6 years.
Wow.
And we barely touched it. Barely. 49 letters. I glimpsed the beginning of what's really going on there. I glimpsed it. I barely even touched it. I glimpsed it. And you realize what's really going on. There's a sefer called Imre Bina, which is by the son of the Baal Tanya, the Mittler Rebbe, where he takes this idea and he takes you to good places. If anybody really wants to see how beautiful Torah can be, learn Imre Bina with someone that could take you through it. The book is like this thick and the letters are like this big. And it shows you how much is really in the Tanya, because everything that he's writing is just explaining the words of the Tanya. And like the Kedushas Levi said about the Tanya, it's an amazing thing that the Baal Tanya put such a big God into such a small book. So the Tanya is much bigger than we think. And later you see that the Mittler Rebbe and others started to expound on what's really going on. And that's all to take you into unity consciousness. And all of the Tanya is really coming from the Rambam and the Arizal. So let's see the words of the great sages. Yes,
It's
Avia.
better to start with
Tanya's
Tanya?
good. Tanya's like source material. And then to go into Imre Bina. Imre Bina it's amazing. I never cried so much when I was learning a sefer before. Tears of just like, the Torah is so beautiful. You feel like it touches you in ways like, oh my God, I didn't know those places, those vistas can exist in my neshama.
How do you get to that stage when you become emotional with it?
When you learn Chassidus, it takes you into your heart. That's the idea. It takes you into your heart. We know there was a famous rabbi named Rabbi Akiva Eger. Rabbi Akiva Eger. He wrote some of the greatest questions ever on the Gemara. The most difficult questions, like unanswerable questions that are just... And he had a grandson named Rav Leibele Eger. And they grew up in the Lithuanian dynasty of great, great rabbis, tzaddikim. And his grandson felt that he wanted to go learn by the Chassidim. Now that wasn't a simple thing. It wasn't pashut. And he went to Kotsk. And by the way, as a side story, before I get to the real story, as a side story, one time Rav Leibele Eger fell into a deep pit when he was in Kotsk, and it was a danger to his life. Now, across Europe, in Lithuania, Rabbi Akiva Eger was learning Torah, and he knew through Ruach HaKodesh that his grandson had fallen into a pit and was in a state of sakonis, nefashos, koach nefesh, and he stopped his learning to daven for him. And he davened for him for 20 minutes. And through a series of miraculous events, Rabbi Leibele Eger was able to come out of the pit and survive. Later, Rabbi Leibele Eger realized, I heard this from Rabbi Tzimayer, later, Rabbi Leibele Eger realized that his grandfather stopped learning for 20 minutes. And because of that, it was too much for him to accept that he made, even though it was for davening, that he made him stop learning for 20 minutes. So he fasted for 20 weeks straight. Shabbos to Shabbos, only eating a little bit at night. Don't do that. Because what Rabbi Akiva Eger's Torah learning was doing, just to appreciate what it means to be learning Torah. Now, don't do that. But a little bit, just try to touch into what it means to learn Torah, to not stop learning Torah. If anybody's ever hung out with tzaddikim, you don't really hang out with tzaddikim. It's not like, oh, like, pass the beers, You know what I'm saying? You get a glimpse into a world of people who do not stop learning Torah, literally, all the time.
They're addicts.
They would just want to be close to God. So, it's a very special thing to be with tzaddikim, and you touch into this world where you just see people just literally learning all the time. I've had a little bit of this with Itchy Meyer, just seeing him, just being a little bit with him in the lull of a Rebbe, and just seeing they're just learning all the time, or helping people, or just helping humanity, nonstop. So back to Rabbi Moshe Chaim. So one time, when he had come back from Kotsk, so he got back to his family, the great dynasty of the family. And they said to him, oh, what did you learn in Kotsk? So he said that God is one. So they kind of laughed, like, God is one. And they brought over like a simple, like a maidservant, somebody that was just cleaning the dishes, simple girl. And they said, Shprinzi, is God one? And she said, of course God is one. So he said, so what did you get in Kotsk? You went there all this time? Years you're spending with the Chassidim? So he said, she says that God is one, but I know that he's one. I know it deep, deep in my heart. So Chassidus takes what we know in our heads and it brings it into our hearts. That's the idea. So you get very emotional when you feel that something is relevant in your heart. So Chassidus is like the entry into a world of making the intellectual emotional. So we're about to see the Rambam, and our job together, as we're going through these Ikarim, is to make something intellectual also very emotional. Okay? Now, you may or may not at some point get up and just dance. And that's a sign that something that was very intellectual became emotional. You're just so excited about it that it's like bursting a little bit. Okay? So here we go. Yichud Hashem Yisboach. Unity consciousness of God. Kloimar. Shenamin shezehu sibas hakol echad. Everything and the cause of everything. Notice that. All existence and the cause of all existence is all one. We usually have something which is a cause and effect. But if the cause and the effect is all one, there's only one. The cause and the effect is all one. Ve'eino ke'echad hazug, echad mitoch shnayim. It's not like one as opposed to two. Like one in a pair. V'loi ke'echad amin, and not like one of a species. V'loi ke'ish ha'echad, and not even like a human being. And when I see Adam, there's one. Adam is one. But Adam is made up of parts. He has a neurological system, a cardiovascular system, an endocrine system. There's major organs, there's minor organs, there's blood vessels, there's many, many parts, cells, mitochondria. There's lots of stuff going on. But it's all him, it's all one, right? When I speak to Aviel, it's one, I'm speaking to you, the wholeness of you. But you have parts to you. So Hashem is not like that. That even you're going to say, but what about Adam Kadmoin? There's like the primordial man we refer to God as. That's even way down in the story. That's not the infinite essence of God. That's already, way down in the Tzimtzum. Way down in the Tzimtzum. That's pretty up there. The worlds of Adam Kadmoin. So Hashem is not like a man that's made up of parts. The Derech Hashem also goes into this at the beginning of Derech Hashem. V'loi echad kamoi haguf haposhet. Not one like a simple body. Ha'echad b'minyan. And not one in a sequence of numbers. The Zohar sums this up very succinctly, which I always come back to. It says, Ant chad v'loi b'chushbin. You're one, but not one in a sequence of numbers. Because in a sequence of numbers, one is the smallest number. But in spirituality, one is the biggest number. It's one, nothing else. One precludes, it's just one. There's only one. There's no space for anything else. If God is one, then where are we? We'll get there, don't we?
We're in the one.
We're in the one.
We're in the world of lies and separation. You don't see the unity.
So that allows for our free will to be able to choose the unity consciousness. Yes. But the idea is that the lies and the separation can't be for real because God is one. That helps you see past the veneer of the lies. If God is one, there's only one, then the veneer goes away.
In the Law we say that there are certain pure evils. Those are also part of the one?
Who made the Yetzer Hara?
God.
Comes from Hashem, right?
Yeah.
It's very important. It's not like some want to suggest that the devil broke away from God and now there's like some power struggle. You can't break out of the one. Just think about that. What do you mean? There's no such thing as leaving the infinite. How do you get out of the infinite?
Even the Satan has, like, he's not pure evil, right? He's assigned from God to do a certain task. I'm saying, like, isn't there like a concept of like pure evil that exists that is only created to be totally eradicated?
So I want to tell you something from the Zohar. Very, very important. This could change your life. Oh, we're already past time. Don't let me start tomorrow without starting with the Zohar, because this really will put a lot into perspective about what the role of the evil inclination is and how it came into the world and how God is running the whole show, and to really in a mature way understand the role of the Yetzer Hara, that force that's pulling a person into evil. We also have to talk about what evil means. What's the Hebrew word for evil? Ra. Well, we hear the shofar outside right now. What is the blast? It's like this. Trua. You know what the root of Trua is? Ra. Evil. What's wrong with that blast? What's so evil about that? So we're going to have to get a lot more maturity into what Ra means. And yes, we're going to see how Ra has a role in the whole context. And Ra is not evil maybe the way we think about it. We have to go much deeper into understanding how God set up the world. B'ezrat Hashem, that will be the journey we'll be going on into this Iker of unity consciousness. And then also seeing that together with the third Iker, which is that it will naturally lead me to not seeing any separation, any body, any limitation in the absolute essence of God. We should be Zoycha Mamish to Mashiach Tzidkeinu B'mehera V'Yemenu. Amen. Have a wonderful day. Kol Tuv.